what happened on this trucker's route from hell. Now, before we get into this, truckers are absolutely underrated in everything that they do, driving long hours, hauling things to and fro, sometimes getting to the location, and sometimes being said, well, yeah, we don't have staffing, you're going to go unload the truck for us. So if you're a trucker out there, know that I respect and appreciate you and everything that you do, and keep being an awesome person. So wanted to get that out of the way first. Let's get into this story.
One morning in 1995, two campers were inside of their little nylon tent inside of this huge forest in Arizona when they started to hear this loud rumbling sound.
It would be Arizona.
So curious, they unzipped their tent and they looked in the direction the sound was coming from, and it was coming from this dirt road kind of straight up ahead of them. And at first, all they could see was this huge dirt and dust cloud kind of barreling towards them.
That's the truck.
And then in the middle of this cloud, suddenly something appeared that both of these campers knew should not have been in this forest. And so seconds later, this thing blew past them and disappeared into the trees in the other direction. And for a moment, the two campers had no idea what to do. They began to kind of rationalize why this thing was here, but before they got very deep into that conversation, they began hearing the rumbling sound again, and they looked, and sure enough, the big thing was coming back. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please replace the like button's maple syrup with brake fluid.
Oh,
also,
please don't.
Subscribe to our channel. And
that's brutal. MrBallen, I love what you want us to do, that like button, but man, that like button's hurting right now. Oh, please don't replace syrup with brake fluid. Oh, that'd be awful. Do not ruin perfectly good pancakes.
On all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
I'm projecting that that was the truck we saw, or trucks. I'm a little confused. It can't be the same one. So it sounds like maybe these teens are hiking in an area that is near or on a trucking road. Maybe they camped in the middle of the road for some reason. And it might be a back access road or something like that. And it coming back, it could... Because depending if it's hauling freight or not, that's a little hard just to U-turn that. So it might be just coming from the opposite direction. That's at least what I'm predicting. We'll see where this goes. I love the face you can see. There's the eye, there's the other eye, there's kind of the face right there. I absolutely love his intro. No, he's great. I love him as a storyteller.
Late
intrusive thought, rumble. You mean the rumble strips. The goal at night where you're supposed to drive onto as many rumble strips as you can. That's an intrusive thought. You're not supposed to drive on the rumble strips.
On the night of May 27th, 1995, a long-haul truck driver named Devin Williams pulled his gigantic refrigerated semi-truck into a truck stop in a city called Kingman, Arizona. After putting his truck in park, Devin reached over and grabbed his sleeping bag off the passenger seat and began to unroll it. Devin would normally get out and use the bathroom and brush his teeth before going to sleep for the night.
Right.
But this night, Devin was so exhausted that instead of going in, he just unfurled that sleeping bag and then climbed behind the front two seats of his truck and got into what's called the sleeper cab, which is an area behind the front two seats in the cab.
I hear some people actually deck this out. And in the case of, I think there was a trucker serial killer, I think he actually had a box inside of this compartment that he would put people into and lock, I think. But no, like, trucks are cool. Truck drivers have a really cool job. I couldn't do it. They work long hours. So yeah, sometimes I'm assuming you just have those days like, like I'm not just gonna go to bed. You guys drive long hours, and even then, some, depending on which trucking company you work for, sometimes they get a little pissy at you, for driving over certain hours, but you're expected to drive certain hours to actually get to the area you're going to, and then there's pay. The plights of truckers are not unknown to me, or at least some of them, and I definitely sympathize with you guys.
Where drivers can lay down and rest. Devin had been on the road for the last 4 days, basically non-stop.
Yeah.
And all he wanted to do was just finish the stupid route and get back home to his wife, Mary Lou, and their 3 kids in the tiny town of Americus in Kansas.
Yeah.
Devin hated
Makes
being
sense.
away from his family for long periods of time, which unfortunately was part of his job, being a long-haul truck driver. But they needed the money because he and his wife had just bought a new house and it was a total fixer-upper, and so they needed to do a whole bunch of repairs to turn that house into a home.
So it's out of necessity.
Missing his family and just wishing he was done with this route, Devin laid in his sleeping bag in the sleeper cab trying to fall asleep, but he just couldn't. And unfortunately, as Devin knew, if...
Actually, this brings up an interesting interaction legally. So there are states like Idaho where concealed carry is a little less restrictive, let's put it that way. But if I were to cross over, say, into Oregon or Washington, without the proper paperwork, one could not CC, right? So if you're a long-haul truck driver and you're crossing many, many, many state lines, or potentially even country lines, depending on the company and the job, right? How do you can't carry, right? Or at least you're restricted in where and how you can carry, right? I'm going to ask any truck drivers in the comments section how self-protection works in that situation. I'd be very curious to know that. Obviously, everything is obviously done legally. Definitely, everything's done legally. I'm hearing that you can't even carry in that situation, which is interesting. So I'd be very interested to hear what policies that are, not under NDA or anything like that. I'd be very curious how that's handled.
If he didn't sleep this night, then he would have to take another break later on this route to rest, because he couldn't just continue to drive with absolutely no sleep. And so taking an additional break that he was not prepping for could affect his ability to get home on time.
Right.
It was Saturday night, and the strawberries and lettuce that Devin was hauling inside of his truck were due in Kansas City, Missouri, 1,300 miles away, on Monday morning. And so Devin began doing the math in his head. If he stopped a little while later to take another sleep break, would he still be able to cover those 1,300 miles by Monday? And he just wasn't sure. Everybody at the trucking company where Devin worked knew the 29-year-old as being very easygoing and good-natured. Trucking was very hard. People drove insanely long hours on very little sleep, and some people even took drugs to stay awake even longer to make sure they hit their deadlines.
Deadlines in trucking are a very, very, very big concern and topic, which is why we supposedly in certain companies have regulations that you can only drive so many hours in a day before you're subject to corrective action. But in order to meet some of these deadlines, you can't do... Like if I'm working, right, I need you to go through 50 loan apps in a day, right? But each loan app takes a half hour, right? Well, what if I only get through 25? Well, you need to get through all 50, and you're the only one that can work on this, right? That kind of thing, right? Not that I did that. It's the concept is the same, right? How are you allocated this much time to get this done when in real reality it's this other time? It's Y, as a variable, and you get in trouble when you can't meet that deadline. It's not necessarily fair.
And so truckers have kind of earned the reputation of being very rough and tough people. And Devin certainly looked rough and tough. He was this big guy who wore cowboy hats. He had a big Fu Manchu mustache. He had tattoos. But in reality, despite how he looked, he was actually like a gentle giant. And really all he talked about were his kids, who he was totally devoted to. The only time anyone at this company saw Devin get mad was when his work interfered with his ability to see his family. And now...
I think that's completely fair for anybody, though. Right? Like if you're in the military, right, and you're slated to leave on X date, but it gets delayed, and you're not going to be able to leave for a period of time at Y date, right? I think a lot of people are going to be very frustrated. If you are, like me, for example, I was trying to go to SCA, but the job I was at just consistently kept me over. I was consistently getting overtime, and I brought it up time and time and time again. I need to be out of here at this time. I need to stop getting overtime here. And no one else got overtime. Everybody else in that building had to sign up for overtime, unless for some reason they were like me, who always got situations where I was always staying after, and then I would obviously get, hey, we need to stay less. It's like, I don't know what you physically want me to do at this point. I am doing my job. I clearly can't get off on time because literally 5 seconds till I have to deal with the situation. 5 more seconds than I would be off, and bam, I'm dealing with something. So, yeah, I mean, even though I'm under a lot of stress right now dealing with YouTube advertisers, copyright, etc., At least I can take days and time when I need to, you know. But anybody with anybody, you know, would get upset if their work, which said they would only do X, Y, and Z, is now demanding A, B, C, and is now taking them away from things that they were looking forward to, whether that be me doing SCA, whether that be this man seeing his kids, right? Whether that be you coming back and seeing your buddies, you know, like that's, I can see the frustration here, and I do think the frustration is valid.
As Devin tossed and turned inside of his sleeper cab, he was getting mad because he was thinking this stupid route and his inability to sleep during this particular break was very likely going to interfere with seeing his family.
Oh, I think, is this, he's going to take an off-road or like an access road or something, isn't he? He's going to try to cut time.
And after an hour of Devin getting angrier and so not sleeping at all,
I feel that.
He finally just gave up on sleep. He chucked his sleeping bag. He climbed out of the cab and he headed into the truck stop where he went to the bathroom, he got a bite to eat, and then he called his boss and he told him that he had just made a stop in order to sleep, but he couldn't, and so he was just going to hit the road again. But don't worry, even though I need another break in order to sleep, I will be in Kansas City on Monday morning with this delivery on time.
I think that they could potentially tell him no, though, still. If he is required to take that break, they could potentially file corrective action against him if he's supposed to. Because at the end of the day, right? So let's put it this way. When I worked, it was actually the same job. I kept getting overtime. I would skip lunches. I would skip breaks. And I consistently got talked to, Kip, you can't skip lunches and breaks. And I tell them, I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to do this. We're downstaffed on this. This system isn't working. I have to do this. I have to do this. What do you want me to do with my time? Well, you can't just skip lunches and breaks. Well, you're clearly not offering constructive criticism here. You have assigned this much work. I'm going to do as much work of that as possible. So companies like that, you know, whether they agree with you taking a break or disagree with you taking a break, will, for legal reasons, they'll be like, look, you can't do this. So it's just an interesting thing to deal with.
Speaking to his boss, Devin left the truck stop, climbed back into his truck, he fired it up, and then before long, he was back on the highway driving east. Devin's boss was a
happened to me all the time. My job prior to my location getting bought out. Rarely ever could get an actual break more than 5 minutes for night shift until they decided to cut 24/7 down until 1 or 2 a.m. Higher ups got pissed I was getting overtime and not on breaks. And we had to point out, hey guys, had to censor that. There's only 2 of us here in the front and 1 in the back. You burnt out all our helpers. So, you know, deal with it and either spend the money to give us the help we need or, yeah, that it's, and we see that a lot in the modern workforce where the workload is unsustainable and it seems like upper management just doesn't have an idea of the current demands and current stressors. And so, yeah, you're going to burn out your new people. You're going to burn out your old people. And so you have these people that are necessarily doing things out of necessity and because it's, you know, they're good at it. But then you're also, furthermore, de-incentivizing good workers because if a good worker finishes up their task first, clearly that means they're not doing anything. Clearly that means they can help everyone else who's straggling. And thus you're getting paid, you know, doing essentially double, if not triple the work, picking up other people's slack. And like, yeah, you're going to get burnt out. I've done this. I have physically had to be an efficient worker and have to suffer the consequences and ramifications and repercussions of being efficient at what I do because I absolutely have to pick up other slack. I've had to do it. And that's a problem. But because of how heavily that gets involved into labor unions and even politics, I do have to back off in regards to really speaking on that any further. I can tell you my experience. I can tell you to executives' face. I've faces. I've told them, you know, this is what I'm experiencing. You know, I haven't been scared to really say my mind. And, you know, obviously I can't say what company out of respect and out of, you know, security. You know, I can't say which one it was. And, you know, I don't really have the ability to do that. I'm sure they know though. And, you know, obviously me being respectful after the fact. And it's just, I can tell you that was my experience. That's what a lot of other people are experiencing. But the solution is one that starts getting into politics.
A guy named Tom Wilson, and he didn't find anything unusual about this phone call he got from Devin. Maybe it was a little unusual that Devin was unable to sleep and that he called his boss to say he was unable to sleep, but Devin sounded totally normal. And so that night, Tom was not worried at all that Devin would not make it to Kansas City by Monday morning. Devin was like one of his most reliable guys. And so if Devin said he was going to be there on Monday morning, even if he needed extra breaks along the way, then he would be there on Monday morning. But
because I see people are on the subject of workplace. Let's put it this way. I had a job where someone had a heart attack and went into work the next day. I never let upper management hear the end of that, to the point that upper management did retort on me saying that that's not how that works. We've had this discussion with this individual. And I tell them that I just straight up told them back, like, you still allowed this individual who suffered a heart attack to come into work the next day. This is the expectation. You cannot tell me otherwise. And, legally they're gonna, well, this isn't the expectation. He shouldn't have, he shouldn't have come back, all that fun stuff. Once again, anonymity for the workplace. This is not a situation that, one, is not necessarily mine to tell. Two, obviously anonymity. Three, I'm not affiliated with this company and they are not affiliated with me. So all that fun stuff.
But on Monday morning, the distribution center in Kansas City, Missouri, where Devin was supposed to go and drop off the lettuce and strawberries, called Tom Wilson and they said, hey, your driver's not here yet. What's going on? Now, at first, Tom was actually really annoyed with the distribution center.
Did he go off the road?
Because he felt like, okay, the clock has just struck the deadline. Devin will likely arrive in the next few minutes, and they're prematurely calling to complain. And so Tom communicated that to the distribution center, and they said, okay, fine, we'll wait a little bit longer. But when almost an hour passed and still Devin had not shown up, the distribution center called Tom back and said, hey, he's not here. Now, after the second call, Tom totally changed his mindset, and he was actually now worried about Devin. And so he apologized to the distribution center.
The fact that, so the fact that he snapped at the distribution center, professionally, that shouldn't happen. But it also, obviously, there's factors that, like, the distribution center could have a habit of just being, really picky and nosy about the times, stuff like that. It really depends. Knowing the state of how tired he is, I hope this individual is still alive. I'm thinking he might have gone off the road at this point.
And said he would get in touch with Devin as soon as he could and figure out where their shipment was. But Tom couldn't just call Devin and ask where he was and what was going on, because this was back in 1995. They didn't have cell phones, and so Tom basically just had to wait for Devin, who's out on the road somewhere, to stop somewhere and call Tom to tell Tom what's going on.
Right.
And so all day Monday, Tom sat at his desk waiting for a call from Devin. And when he didn't get a call from Devin, Tom began calling his other drivers all over the country, asking them if maybe they had had some sort of interaction with Devin and knew where he was and why he had not made it to Kansas City on time.
I understand the stress, I do, because working at a warehouse, I've had somehow a boring and also colorful career history. Working at a warehouse, like, I get it. If you don't have product, or say if the product is stuck in either shipping, unloading, getting sorted, or to be able to further sort and give work, your entire pipeline gets disrupted. I got to a point when I worked at a warehouse that is supposed to have a perpetual workflow that I finished my work. My rail was completely clear and sorting, and I went to like the 5 other people around me and helped them clear their rail. So like 5 whole stations were clear, because that's the kind of worker I am. I finished my thing. Let me help out the team. Let's make sure all of us can finish together. Let's make sure we all are able to get caught up. But that's me versus other people. And so, yeah, if you get a situation like that, if you don't have product coming in, suddenly your receiving people aren't doing anything. Your people that are organizing to be able to finish, or you're like me, and you backlog like 120 entire totes of product that need to be sorted, for the next shift, right? So that also technically leads into efficient workers getting punished because suddenly you backlog things and nobody else backlogs as much as you do. Got a colorful work history, let's put it that way. But it's interesting. It's interesting that work is interesting. I totally lost where I was going there.
But none of the drivers had any idea what was going on with Devin. No one had spoken to him. Then, that evening, Tom got a call, but it was not from Devin. It was from Devin's wife, Mary Lou. And she was calling to say, where's Devin? He was supposed to be home by now.
He's missing. At this point, I think a missing persons report could be filed with the authorities.
And he's not. I haven't heard from him in days. What's going on? And at this, Tom suddenly thought, okay, we have a real problem here. And so when Tom explained to Mary Lou what was going on with Devin, how he had missed this deadline, Mary Lou panicked and immediately called the police.
Right.
A little while later, a police officer in Americus, Kansas, arrived at Mary Lou's house to take...
Worked, person in chat, Sierra Mike, worked at Amazon Fulfillment Warehouse during Black Friday for 2 months. Us pickers got shut down for 3 hours because a truck packers couldn't keep up because truckers were late. Right, so right, leading back to my point. Thank you for getting me back on point there. So I understand the frustration when a distribution center or a warehouse starts getting a little testy at trucking companies. Not necessarily that it's right. I understand the logic and the pipeline, the workflow that goes into that at the very least. And I've heard stories of things like decant and picking and stowing. Let's put it that way.
Down the missing person report.
If you know the terms, you know.
That, the deputy assured Mary Lou that very likely her husband would be found and he would be just fine. And so they explained to Mary Lou that what they would do is put out an alert to all the different police departments that fell kind of roughly along the route that Devon's truck had been on and see if any of them had had some sort of interaction with Devon. You know, maybe he got into an accident, maybe his truck broke down and he was stranded somewhere, you know, maybe he was hospitalized, who knows? But missing
persons reports can, as far as I'm aware, can be called in anytime, but it comes down to when the search will actually begin. Isn't it like 48 hours to give leeway for people that may just be missing or they may just be like off doing something? But then I guess how do wellness checks factor into that? I don't actually know. I'd have to have somebody comment on the protocol for missing persons.
Very likely one
24
of
to
these
48 hours or 24 hours
would know where Devon was. And sure enough, after this alert went out, the officer got a call back very quickly from a sheriff's department in a place called Coconino County, Arizona. Coconino County was located 200 miles to the east of Kingman, Arizona, which was where Devon had been on Saturday night, but he couldn't sleep.
200 miles.
His boss to say he was going to hit the road again. But interestingly, the sheriff's department in Coconino County made it very clear to the police officer in Americus, Kansas, that they had no idea where Devon was, but they definitely knew where his truck was.
Yeah.
In fact, basically everybody in Coconino County knew where Devon's truck was. It was all anybody in that county was talking about. Because on Sunday, so the day before Devon was reported missing, somebody driving Devon's truck spent the entire day terrorizing hikers and campers inside of the Tonto National Forest in Coconino County.
He drove it. Okay, the driver drove that into a national forest. That would make sense.
The Tonto National Forest, which is 600,000 acres of just rugged wilderness preserve, was nowhere near Devon's trucking route. In fact, it wasn't near any trucking route ever. It's like 20 miles off of the highway, and the
So who was driving it?
roads in the forest are barely wide enough to support small cars going through,
like sedan,
let alone a 48-foot long, massive 10-ton semi-truck like Devon was driving. But on Sunday morning, so roughly 8 hours after Devon had called his boss Tom, two hikers named Lynn and Jack Yarrington were in their tent inside of Tonto National Forest, just having a nice time. It's peaceful, it's quiet, and they're right near this dirt road that kind of bent around a corner. And suddenly, they began to hear a rumbling sound coming from one end of this road. And so they were in their tent, they unzipped it, they looked out, and at first, all they saw on the road coming in their direction was this huge cloud of dust and smoke. And then through the dust and smoke came Devon's humongous truck blazing down this road at practically full speed. And at first, Jack and Lynn are like, how is this truck even in the forest?
That's definitely an oddity. Like, can you imagine, right? Imagine like an F-35 landing in the middle of Yellowstone, right? Imagine if you're in the forest in Montana, right? Say you're just camping up there. I don't know, maybe you're in like Butte or something, right? And you just see a semi just roll in past your campsite, and there's like no road, or like maybe there's like, you know, the road you use to like walk in, right? Like, that's generally not supposed to be there.
it get here? How did it actually manage to drive to this point? And after Devon's truck whizzed past them and blazed off in the other direction out of sight,
Right.
Lynn and Jack weren't scared or worried. They were just totally confused. And so they began speculating, like, well, maybe the driver got lost and they're trying to find a place to turn around or something. And sure enough, a couple of minutes later,
Turns around.
they heard a rumbling sound and they saw
Did it have its cargo on it or not? Because turning around would be a feat.
another cloud of dust, and it was Devon's truck now coming back in the other direction on the same dirt road. And so Jack and Lynn, they kind of backed up behind their tent. And
I
they
do like that he does not a real photo or real photo. I actually really like that he provides this information.
watched as this truck blazed past them again, flying out the other direction. And so in some ways that kind of confirmed to Lynn and Jack that
He's
yes,
lost.
this driver, who's definitely driving recklessly at this point, has likely gotten lost. They've managed to turn around and now they're heading back out to the highway, and that's all this was. And then all of a sudden, as they're kind of chatting about it and laughing about it, they hear the sound of the truck coming back again. And they look up, and sure enough, there's Devon's truck barreling down the road again.
Why? That's the real question. Is why? For what reason?
Except this time, Jack and Lynn, they looked where Devon's truck was going, and they saw there was a small sedan coming up the road in the opposite direction. So Devon and the sedan are going to collide, and because this road was actually on a turn, the driver of the sedan couldn't actually see the truck, and the driver of the truck, whether it was Devon or somebody else, couldn't see the sedan. And so both drivers are driving towards each other without realizing it, and so Jack and Lynn, they jump up, they begin screaming and yelling at the driver of the truck to slow down, but the truck didn't slow down. It just continued coming down the road, and the sedan driver, he saw Jack and Lynn flailing their arms and trying to get somebody to stop on the road, and so sensing there was another car, the sedan came to a full stop, and then right in front of them, they saw this truck come barreling around the road, and so the sedan began backing up wildly, trying to get out of the way of this huge truck, and then finally, the driver of the sedan just cut the wheel and peeled off the side of the road into the brush, and right as they did, the truck, which had not slowed down at all, even though the driver could have clearly seen the sedan, just whizzed right past the sedan and would have...
That's the only logical decision you could make at that point. The truck is not going to move. You are encountering, effectively in this situation, an unstoppable object. Are you going to be the immovable object, or are you going to get out of the way so that way it doesn't run you over?
Smashed into it if the sedan had not jumped off the road. The driver of the sedan got out of the car, and when Jack and Lynn ran up to him to make sure he was okay, he would tell them that he got a good look at the driver of the truck as he drove past him, and he told them that the driver was just gripping the wheel, looking totally straight ahead, no expression whatsoever, just barreling past him. It was like he didn't even look at the sedan. He was just going. A little later that day, and not far from where this incident had just happened on this road with Jack and Lynn and this sedan, there was this family that was hiking through Tonto National Forest, and they had arrived at this big, beautiful open field in the middle of the forest.
Right.
And they planned to have a picnic in this field. But as they came out of the tree line and walked into this beautiful open high grass meadow area, they looked out and they saw just kind of in the middle of the field was this huge truck that made no sense. How in the world could this truck have gotten to this meadow? They didn't know. But they clearly saw there's a truck, and the father of the family, he saw there was a man standing next to this truck, just kind of looking away from them off at the mountains in the distance. And so this family kind of assumed that the driver of this truck had somehow gotten into this meadow and maybe their truck was stuck, and so now they need help. And so the father told his family to stay put for a second, and then he, on his own, walked across the meadow towards this truck. And as the father got closer, he did see that very clearly the truck was stuck in the mud.
Right.
And so this driver very likely is stranded. And so as he got close enough, the father yelled out to this guy and said, "Hey, do you need some help? We can go back and call someone, what can we do for you?" But the man who was standing outside of the truck didn't even turn around to talk to this father. He just kept standing there motionless, looking off into the distance. And so the father made it about 5 or 6 feet away from this guy, and the father just stopped and very clearly said, "Hey, I'm talking to you. Do you need help?"
It's not even necessarily that it's anything paranormal. He could just be catatonic. Like, Sleep does weird things to people.
And at this point,
Or lack
the
of.
man who was standing next to the truck, he turned around and he looked at the father. And immediately the father kind of backed up for a second because there was something off about this guy. The guy was just kind of standing there and he was staring at the father, and he opened his mouth like he was about to speak. But instead of speaking, he just kept opening his mouth wider and wider.
Shock?
Until it was as wide as he could get it. And then he began wiggling his lower jaw back and forth as fast as he could, and then
Shock, mental break.
clicking his teeth simultaneously. And so the father just began backing up like there was something wrong with this guy.
That is the smart move at that point. The situation is outside of normal social parameters. That is you need to reassess what's going on. You don't know if this person might potentially try to take your face off or something.
And right as the father was about to just turn around and leave and go protect his family from this guy, the guy stopped with his mouth, and then he just stared directly at the father and said very calmly, "I didn't do it. They did it." When the father heard this, he was already so weirded out by this guy that he didn't even have any questions to follow up with. Instead, he just turned and began running back towards his family. And so feeling very unsettled, the family, they ran back to their car, they drove back home, and they called the police about this guy and his truck. It would take a deputy from the Coconino County Sheriff's Department.
I mean, no crime has been committed. However, well, as far as we're aware, right? No crime has necessarily at this time been committed, but there is a truck in the middle of a national park that shouldn't be there. At the very least, I feel that would warrant officers investigating.
A little while to finally navigate their way all the way out to this meadow where this truck and this guy apparently were. And when the deputy got there, they walked out into this meadow, and sure enough, just like the father had said, there was the truck stuck in the mud. And so the deputy began walking out to the truck, expecting to see the driver, this guy who the father had said was acting totally weird.
No, he's gone.
But when the deputy got up there, he found the truck was totally abandoned. There was nobody in the cab, there was nobody nearby, it was just sitting here, but it was still running. And so the deputy tried to open up the cab, but it was locked. He did look inside, and everything looked very neat and orderly. And then he went around to the back of the truck, and he opened up the back doors, and he found the refrigeration unit was still on, and inside of this truck was lots and lots of strawberries and lettuce. So the deputy...
Oh, that's stuff that can spoil, actually. Huh.
He really didn't know what to make of this truck in the middle of the field, combined with this report that the father gave about this guy who was standing near it, acting totally weird. And so he just checked the license plate of the truck and he ran it against his database to see if there were any matching reports of missing trucks or missing truck drivers, but there weren't any. Because remember, this is on Sunday this is happening, and it wasn't until the next day, Monday, that Devin was reported missing, and his truck was added to a list of missing trucks and missing truck drivers. And so the Coconino County deputy just called a towing company who came out and hauled Devin's truck out of the forest. And then 24 hours later, when Devin was reported missing, the Coconino County Sheriff's Department put it all together and contacted the officer in Americus, Kansas to say, okay, we do have Devin's truck, but we don't have any other answers for you. The behavior of the man who was driving Devin's truck through Tonto National Forest was so insanely out of character for someone like Devin that it seemed totally impossible that Devin could have done this. But both Lynn and Jack Yarrington and the other people who saw this truck flying through the forest on that Sunday, they all insisted that the man they saw in the cab driving this truck matched the picture of Devin Williams. But there was absolutely no reason for why Devin would want to go to the Tonto National Forest. And even if he did want to go to this forest for some reason, he should have known that his massive semi-trailer truck was not a good choice to be driving around these narrow dirt roads in the middle of this wilderness preserve.
It's not a case of a single misturn or a single wrong turn. There are many, many turns that led us to the point with the campers and the sedan. There are many, many missed and wrong turns at that point.
Know about Devin is that at the time he went missing, all he likely wanted to do was just get home to Americus, Kansas to be with his wife and 3 kids again. That's really all he cared about. The police did consider that, maybe Devin just ran away. But that theory didn't add up.
No.
Devin had no criminal record. He had a great relationship with his wife, so there were no issues there. And there were no other kind of outstanding relationship issues with friends or family. And financially, even though it was a little tight, they were doing just fine. They just wanted some extra money to fix up this house and make it really nice.
I mean, at that point, I mean, it's not a domestic issue, at least, as far as was proven by these statements. It wasn't domestic, it wasn't financial, it wasn't workplace motivated, it seems, because his boss seemed pretty understanding. So, I mean, they ruled out those factors. I mean, match some drug use. It very well could be drug use, but we'd have to find some sort of body for toxicology. And we'd have to also ascertain if drug use was habitual or even present with him.
It wasn't like they were struggling to put food on the table. Also, the police considered that, maybe Devin was kidnapped or something. But Devin is like this big, imposing, tattooed cowboy hat, big mustache, tough truck driver. I mean, who's going to try to kidnap that guy? Devin also had no medical issues. He wasn't struggling with his mental health. He had no neurological abnormalities. He also never used drugs and always passed every single drug test that he got while working for this trucking company.
Okay.
Devin was basically just this totally normal, nice, well-adjusted guy with...
So, and that's the thing, is that now we've established there's at least, in that the night of, potentially could be popping a stimulant, allegedly, theoretically, but there hasn't been any drug use up through this point, which is backed by drug screenings, or at least things that, even if it was used, right, something that would pass through a screening, if that makes sense, right? So, I mean, his record's pretty clean. No history,
to run or hide from. And so none of this made any sense. Police mounted a massive search inside of Tonto National Forest, and during the search, the couple, Jack and Lynn Yarrington, who had seen the truck barreling up and down the road and nearly collide with that sedan, they would tell searchers that they actually thought they saw Devin Williams, not in his truck, but out on foot, walking around on Monday morning, so just hours before he would have been reported missing. They said they just saw this guy wandering barefoot down the road as they were driving out of the forest, and they slowed down to ask him if he was okay, and this guy, who looked exactly like Devin Williams, responded by picking up a rock and throwing it at their car. And so Jack and Lynn just drove past him, not realizing that this was the guy who very likely was driving that truck. Now, the police, when they began this search, were pretty confident they would find Devin, especially after hearing from Jack and Lynn that he was pretty likely on foot and without shoes walking around the forest.
Well, you'd be surprised how far people can get in rugged, impassable, or even impossible terrain without any sort of assistance. Like, humans are actually really weirdly good at getting places we shouldn't be.
It seemed like he could not get very far. But despite this huge search, they could not find Devin. There was absolutely no trace of him. And so, after nearly 3 weeks of searching and not finding Devin, the police called off the search. Then, on May 2nd, 1997, so almost exactly 2 years from when Devin had been reported missing,
his body?
2 hikers were walking on this trail in the middle of Tonto National Forest, right in the area where police had extensively searched for Devin 2 years earlier. These 2 hikers, they're walking on this trail, and up ahead they see there's this white thing right in the middle of the trail, just kind of sitting out. Now, this is a well-trafficked trail, and so they're wondering, what is this thing? And so they walk up, and they see this white thing is a perfectly intact human skull. There's no skeleton, it's just the skull. And so
at that point, from my understanding, it's not that you entered a crime scene, right? But it should be treated like a crime scene, and that is when you get the proper authorities involved, and they come out, with forensics, and they seal off the area.
Hikers, they gather.
It's why, like, or if urban exploring, right? If you're urban exploring and you find a body, at that point, even if you're trespassing, generally it's, look, this is a crime scene now. Like, we need to get someone involved. Yes, good for bringing up the missing 411 cases. People go missing in forests under very, very interesting and unnatural circumstances with frightening regularity, actually. Which is it an issue that I've been missing the forest the past couple years? I'm just like, man, I want to, like, the deep woods are calling to me. I don't think that's a good sign.
They can't believe they're looking at a real human head, and they're thinking, how in the world did it get here? Why hasn't anybody else seen this and taken it? Like, how are we the first ones to see this? And so they would end up calling the police. The police would come out, they'd gather up the skull, it would be sent in for testing, and sure enough, DNA testing would reveal the skull belonged to Devin Williams. No one has ever been able to explain what actually happened to Devin Williams, but the discovery of his skull inside of Tonto National Forest nearly guarantees that the driver of the truck 2 years earlier really was Devin, and the guy standing outside of the truck that was stuck in the mud in the meadow was likely Devin, and the guy throwing rocks at Jack and Lynn's car was Devin. People have put forth a whole host of theories about what happened to Devin, ranging from he had some sort of medical event where he kind of lost his mind and that's what caused all this strange behavior, or maybe Devin was on drugs despite not having any history of drug use. Maybe he took a really strong drug and that's what caused him to do all this. And still others believe that maybe there's a paranormal element to this whole story, that perhaps Devin was contacted by aliens and that's what induced all the bizarre behavior, and then ultimately he was abducted by said aliens, and then somehow his skull wound up back on this trail in the middle of Tonto National.
I mean, we can't rule out foul play, technically. I have nothing to base this on. I mean, if we're going for wild speculation to begin with, right? I mean, it's not impossible, because there have been truck stop killers, absolutely. There are people with kill kits all around the fucking country. What was it? BTK was a big person who did that. Absolute worst humanity has to offer, people that do this. And it's not impossible that... I guess that doesn't necessarily... I mean, that kind of explains why his body wouldn't be found, why only his skull would be found in an area they already deposited at a later time. But it doesn't necessarily describe... It could have been in a catatonic state or a potential drug-induced state, but without toxicology, there's not really any way to know. And was driving back and forth, hallucinating or thinking he's somewhere he shouldn't be, and then he gets his truck stuck, because clearly there's a shock there, it feels like, with, moving his jaw, trying to, just staring off, right? And in regards to I didn't do it, they did it, could be hallucination onset. In regards to aggression, I mean, he's clearly tired, probably hasn't slept. He would seem to be driving, or at least was maybe micro-sleeping. I mean, and then, he's obviously just a person walking in the forest, potentially easy prey. I don't know. That's a hard one. That's a hard one. Something could have happened when he snapped. Yeah, and people break under circumstances to begin with, right? Which is why I look at things like this and I try to rationalize it, and I try to come with, reasonable, mundane explanations rather than, oh, it was just aliens, or, oh, it was just he was possessed by the supernatural. I think that there are elements of this here that could be written off as mundane, logical, and feasible realistically. But, I can see where some ET, UFO, paranormal elements are going to come into this
forest. And as crazy as that sounds, still to this day, no one has any idea what happened to him, so that theory is just as good as any other.
Yeah.
So that's going to do it. If you enjoyed today's story, be sure to check out our podcast called the MrBallen Podcast, where we have literally hundreds more stories just like this one available exclusively on Amazon Music.
Yeah, and to be fair, Zero Mike, I'm also a internet dingus, so I don't have any formal background. While I may have taken Philosophy 101, I am not a psychiatrist, psychologist, any sort of professional in that regard. So, I mean, yeah, you could, having a hard time in chat, people having a hard time seeing a mental break, due to one day of bad sleep or lack of sleep, while hitting everyone different, right? I would be outside of my bounds and responsibility to say that this is definitively what happened, because ultimately I really don't know. That's a hard one. See chat, potentially demonic possession. He was really tired, making more susceptible. I actually didn't know that being exhausted or tired had an impact on that. I have some friends I should probably ask about that. Not that they've had it or done it, and they're just a little more read on certain aspects than me. But Yeah, no, this was an interesting one, and it always hits me different with missing persons cases because this is a perfect example. This entire situation is an example of reality is stranger than fiction. You know, from everything we can say, it was person going back and forth, and he just kind of up and vanished. And it's really sad because sometimes you really don't get closure. I think I was watching, maybe it was another MrBallen video. I can't remember who it was. There was a someone in the someone in the U.S. military went to somewhere off base they shouldn't have been, and one of the service members, quote unquote, at this bar said that hey, they were missing persons, but you know they were worried about getting caught off base and the repercussions, especially if it wasn't true. And you know, it's unfortunate because there is evil in this world. There's absolutely things like human trafficking. There's absolutely evil in this world, like BTK, like Ed Gein, and so many. Oh, I think past at this point. I did a college paper on Ed Gein, is why I know as much as I do, and it's sad that people really aren't going to get the closure that they need. But you know, what are your thoughts on this? Mitch says, I heard the story before. Non-zero chance it was a duplicate vehicle with duplicate plates driven by a malicious actor. Similar case happened with the Colorado Forestry Service a decade ago. Case remains unsolved. How do you get duplicate plates? I'd be very interested because I thought the DMV would be a little... I don't know. That's interesting. I'd be curious on that. Because allegedly during the 70s, right, how we have gas issues in 2020, right? This was, I believe, the 70s, 1970s in America, where gas was an issue, and certain cities and places were doing, if you had an even or odd license plate, right? People were allegedly, not that I can confirm or anyone around me can confirm or deny, allegedly the practice was to, if you needed gas, just to swap license plates with somebody. Now you should absolutely not do that because they are registered with certain vehicles. I'd be very interested to know how that bad actor was able to get a hold of duplicate plates and make that happen. But I mean, that could also be an explanation for that as well. But alas, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that this was a completely mundane, you know, experience? Do you think there's a supernatural element to it? You know, obviously with respect to this individual, obviously respect to their family. As after all, I'm an internet dingus, and I really don't know one way or the other. This is all speculation based. You know, what are your possible thoughts of what it could be? Is there any similar situation that you've seen? Same regards to Colorado. Anything else? If you're a truck driver, what are your interesting stories? Thank you for everything that you do. What are your interesting stories? What do you have to share? Spooky or not spooky? You know, we appreciate you, and you guys don't nearly get enough recognition. But that'll do it for this time, and I will see you in the next one.